So, chapter 2 on utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is the right decision is the one that achieves the most happiness for the most people, and what is the best pain to happiness ratio. And looking at question 1 in general, what was your emotional reaction to utilitarianism? Could you use it as your main ethical theory? Why or why not? I think if I am going through and choosing my primary ethical theory, this is probably the one that I think I use most often to rationalize decisions. I don't know how I feel about saying that out loud and making a decision on that, but I think that out of a lot of these theories, utilitarianism is probably the one that, if I really think about it, that's probably the one that I use most frequently in figuring out how many people does this really affect and what's the best option for the most amount of people. Kind of that, if you're voting theory, if we're voting, the larger population chooses X, then we just have to roll with it, which is not always fun for the rest of us, as we are finding out right now. I did not vote for him, and it makes me sad. My emotional reaction to utilitarianism, as I'm kind of coming to that decision, is that I really want to include more parameters and not just think what's the greater good here, because I don't think that's always the right way to make decisions either. That doesn't always make sense. Because there are so many other things that are involved. But I think if I were to choose an ethical theory, I guess that one would probably be it. I'm just going to flip this over.
I do agree. I think in the overall landscape, I guess, I feel that this theory would be what I would say I go to the most. Just because, in a lot of decision making, I think what's going to be best for everyone. But I don't know that it's the right theory to be leaning on. I just think it's kind of, anytime you, like the voting, you go back to, okay, who wants to do this? Who wants to do this? I think that's just how we're kind of raised from being little. Everybody wants pizza, but I wanted macaroni. The greater good, everybody wants pizza, everyone's going to get more pleasure from that. We learn that from a young age, so I think it's what we do go to and what we rely on. Although a lot of the scenarios in here, I'm like, no, this is not what I would choose. So right. I think when it's not moral decision making, when it's not something that's going to be a tough decision making, it's a great theory to use. But if it came down to, am I going to
life or death,
kill the boy on the boat and eat him?
Right.
Reading it, I think, oh no, I can't do that. But if I was in this situation, I maybe would.
Right.
I don't know.
Right. That's such a good point.
Yeah, because again, we don't. The other aspects of that situation, how long you've been in the boat, being under the sun, being dehydrated, it's gonna mentally alter your way of thinking, and as we all sit here well fed and hydrated and not exhausted and plenty of sleep and whatnot, properly nourished, our initial reaction to that would be totally different than if we were in that boat. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. Properly nourished and well fed. I think kind of a current example of what I think maybe I'm using utilitarianism and current thinking is with healthcare reform and the healthcare debates that are going on. Looking at
question 2.
Yeah, I think this is question 2.
Yep.
I think who's going to get the greater good is this going to cover more people? Are less people going to be covered? What's going to be the cost? I think what's going to be the best for the overall population in the United States is probably going to be better, but I can see also, on the other hand, where I should think, no, this is going to maybe cause my premiums to rise, or I don't fall into the category where it's going to be less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I think that wouldn't be the best theory for me to be using. It's tough.
It is tough. Because there's, as we've said in this section and last section, it's so hard to figure out and know if you're in those circumstances exactly what you're going to be doing or what you would choose, I guess. And especially when we're talking about healthcare as an example, it's hard to know until like it directly impacts you.
Mm-hmm.
I never even thought about that, Denise, well, I'm not in that bracket, so it doesn't help me.
Yeah.
But you said that, I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. That's not going to affect me how I would want it to. It affects me through like my work insurance, mm-hmm. because it helps with making sure that as a county employee, we get our insurance covered for us. It's just like, as a benefit, we don't have to pay in. But my husband his work doesn't do that, so his insurance premiums might go up, I guess. In which case, that really sucks for us. Yeah. And I don't want to use utilitarianism then to rationalize whether that was a good decision.
Like in the overall, when they were coming out with numbers between the Affordable Care Act and how many people are currently covered or projected to be covered through the years, and then the new, what were they calling it, the American something Healthcare Act
like
that was just proposed. When I was looking at the numbers of projected people to be covered, I thought, no, let's stick with the one that's going to have more people covered. And even though it needs some refining and some mm-hmm. fixing, but just looking at numbers, I kept thinking, stick with the one that's going to provide more coverage.
Right.
Well, and I remember back when Obamacare started and how there were so many people that were against it and nobody's going to want this and, it's not going to help anybody. And then websites are crashing because there's so many people right. trying to sign up in the open marketplace.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like we don't even have enough information on mm-hmm. healthcare to make an informed decision.
Right.
Because when we would likely pick the scenario that's going to do the greatest good and help the most people, mm-hmm. we are misled.
Right.
Because Obamacare is horrible. It's not going to help anybody. But yet when you see the numbers and the websites crashing and the demand for mm-hmm. it, that's conflicting information.
Yeah. But I'm also not one of the millions and millions of people that don't have coverage through their workplace, or that the cost of being covered is so extravagant that I wouldn't be able to afford it.
Right.
So,
and if you were, you would have a different perspective and a different opinion.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm. So question 3, the ticking time bomb scenario. Another one that kind of gives that gut reaction where I think, if there's a person that could give us the information we need to say, if we would have had a person that could have saved from the 9/11 tragedy, if we would have been able to torture that person and get the information and avert that entire thing, yes, do it. But, at the same time, is it right to harm someone for that,
Right. So along with all the other nerdy things that I do, I watch a lot of the superhero shows on the CW, and one of the shows is The Arrow, which is based off of the Green Arrow comic series, and it's a very, very, very dark series, in which currently what's happening is the Green Arrow is a really dark character anyway. He was on a ship, and their ship capsized and went down, and then he was stranded on an island. And then he was found, and he was trained along with someone who found him, I can't even remember why they were on the island, but it was really odd. And they trained him to essentially be an assassin and to do all these nasty things. And then he continued to fall into those situations as he went on. He eventually, at one point in his lifetime, before, I guess it was like right when he started becoming the Green Arrow, he was a member of the Russian mafia, and he would torture people for information. And that's coming back around in the current season, because even the boss and the Russian mafia was telling him, like, you don't need to torture people to get information. It will help us, but this isn't a good thing to be doing. He said, no, I enjoy it.
So, did you guys watch the show Dexter?
No, but I want to.
Okay, so Dexter is a kind of a crime scene investigator. He does blood sampling. So if there's a crime scene, he uses the blood, say gunshot wound, he connects the dots of where the blood is to recreate possibly what could have happened. He does all the DNA, all of that kind of work. So he's also a serial killer, but only kills those that have killed others.
Yeah.
And so to him, he is using his inner demon of being a serial killer and needing to satisfy that, but he uses it for good, the greater good of the community, to take these other murderers off the street. And so all throughout, it's how does he justify that? And as people kind of find out, or suspect him of things, then they have to kind of eternalize, is he doing the right thing? He's taking a murderer or bad people off the streets and keeping our community safe, but he's a murderer. So very interesting. It's a pretty good series. If you are looking for something to watch, maybe on Netflix.
An arrow.
Yes. So, but even in watching the show, I'm like, no, Dexter's the good guy. He's the good guy, right? But in a real life situation, I probably would be like, no,
that's not okay.
This is not okay.
But they make scenarios like this in TV shows and movies all the time. But more of a real life, and maybe there was no ticking time bomb, but World War II and all the torture that they did to prisoners and any wartime, actually, if they catch somebody from the other side,
right,
they're going to torture you till you tell them everything you know, and then they're going to kill you.
Absolutely. So and it's going to keep the rest of us safe.
Yeah.
So hopefully.
But probably not.
So I guess back to this scenario, would torture be justified? In what circumstances might change your answer and why? It depends on the situation. If torture is justified, maybe the bomber is somebody who habitually does this, and they've tried to catch him and they haven't been able to, and whatever. So they now have to resort to they have to bump up their skill set a little bit to get the information that they need, but make that person that knows about the bomb into a child. And is that going to affect your decision on whether or not torture is justified? It would affect mine, but
right.
But then again, you go back to World War II and the Holocaust, and I talk about that all the time. You are kind of brainwashed into thinking that this is right. So, who's ever got this person, maybe they feel torture is justified no matter what because it's going to save all these people.
I think it's easier to use utilitarianism when you think of a large population.
Yes.
When you break it down to a smaller population, I think it becomes more difficult to use that theory.
Yeah, I agree.
Like Grey's Anatomy.
Exactly.
Yep.
That story with the ticking time bomb from the book was really hard to read for me because the entire time I read it, I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I still feel like torture is not the answer to anything. And then at the end, it says, well, that you released that guy and he came back and murdered everyone.
Yeah.
Except for you. And it's like,
yeah, man, should have tortured him.
I guess, like, we should have tortured him, maybe. It's so hard. All of this is so hard.
Yes. Okay. Does that conclude questions?
Yeah, I think that concludes chapter 2.